Peace, love, liberty, radio.
And the walls come crashing down as the war at home reaches your town. You have no choice, it's safe and clean. We all submit to the war machine.
It's Wednesday, which means you know what that means. That means that it's the day that I answer your questions. But before I get into answering your questions, and I do have several this week, but before I get into your questions, I want to make a couple of announcements. So announcement number one. The January issue of FPPNews is available. There was a slight delay because of the holidays. There was not a delay with the printer. There was a delay with the delivery of the papers. Well, you see, I started using a new printing company who is offering a better product at a lower price. Yay, free market. So I had been using the print shop for the Keene Sentinel, and they were doing a good job. I liked the job that they were doing, but I wound up getting a telephone call from someone that actually winds up reading the paper. His wife, I believe he said, works in Keene, and she grabs a copy of the paper from one of the locations somewhere downtown probably. And, well, she took him a copy, and apparently he had been reading the paper for quite some time, and he liked the product. Well, he works for the Concord Monitor, and so he gave me a call, and he said, hey, I want to talk to you about prices. And so I gave him a call back and said, well, here's the price range that I would like, and I don't really want to have to drive to Concord. He said, no, you would not have to drive to Concord to pick up these papers. We will deliver them to you, and we will do that at no added cost. And I said, okay, what's the cost of the paper? And he gave me a number, and I said, that's a little bit higher than what I'm paying now. And he said, all right, how about this number? And I said, all right, thank you, sir. And so I'm getting these papers now done for about $6 per month cheaper. It's a slightly larger size newspaper. So if you go to news.fpp.cc, you can download the PDF of the paper, and you will notice that it's now 4 columns instead of 3. And that's because the slightly larger size, I can now have a standard width column on the paper. And I'm actually able to wind up fitting a little bit more information in the paper now just because of the slightly larger size. So, newspaper is available. If you are not a subscriber, you can become one by, again, going to news.fpp.cc. You can subscribe either with Bitcoin or you can subscribe using PayPal. So that's announcement number one. Announcement number two, and everybody that's a member of the fans program gets a copy of the paper. So because those were delayed getting to me, they were delayed getting in the mail, so those got dropped in the mail yesterday. You will get that soon. But that's not the announcement with the fans program. The announcement with the fans program, and I don't promote this as often as I should, but the fans program, that's friends, allies, and Numery supporters. The fans program has actually added a new goal. So originally the goal was reach $500 and I'll make a thrice daily newscast. Currently I'm doing a daily 5-minute newscast. Hit the goal of 500, I will begin doing a mid-morning and late afternoon edition of the newscast. Well, the new goal, in addition to that $500 goal that will remain there, the new goal that I've added is goal to reach before 500, so steps. The next goal that I'm looking to reach is $200 per month from fans. So once I hit $200 per month. Instead of doing Monday, Wednesday, Friday for Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, I will do Monday through Friday, meaning that you will get 2 extra Peace, Love, Liberty radios every week. So that will wind up allowing me to hopefully wind up getting more sponsors, because there will be more advertising options available as far as slots that I could wind up filling. So hopefully that will wind up leading to increased revenues down the line. But again, intermediary step before that $500 is going to be a $200 step that I'm hoping to reach. And I'm bringing in right now about, I think, $45 per month in the fans program through Patreon. Plus, there's still somebody that donates through PayPal. So I think I'm up to about like $55, $58, somewhere in that range. So I'm about a quarter of the way to that first goal of $200. So if you want to join the fans program, head over to fans.fppradio.com. That's fans.fppradio.com. But you did not tune in to this show to hear me shamelessly self-promote. Now, did you? No, you did not. You tuned in to this show because you want me to answer your questions. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I've got a couple of questions that came in from Twitter, one that came in from liberty.me, and one that came in on Facebook. So I will begin with the question from liberty.me. The question says, you're the guy whose voice I hear every hour on LRN. That would be the Liberty Radio Network, one of the outlets in which you can hear this show, Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, as well as the daily 5-minute newscast, FPP Radio News. Other outlets, of course, being IPM Nation, Freedom Phalanx Radio, and I might be forgetting something, but I don't recall. I'm not positive if I'm on Liberty Talk FM or not. But I've got the listening options of places on FPPradio.com. But anyway, back to the question. He says, you're the guy whose voice I hear every hour on LRN. Darryl, what podcast do you like lately? Well, I don't listen to as many podcasts as podcasts that I like, if that makes any sense. So there are shows that I like, but I don't use one of these podcatcher things. I know I should, but I don't. But I really like Sovereign Tech, and generally when I hear Sovereign Tech, it's when I'm in the LRN studio and getting some work done, and I will have the headphones turned up so that I can listen to LRN. And generally, if I'm working on the weekends, it's going to be during that podcast loop, and I'll hear Sovereign Tech. Now, I did actually just download an episode of Sovereign Tech because I really wanted to hear this particular episode, and I'm not sure when I'll wind up getting the chance to listen to it, and I know that I'm not going to be in the LRN studio anytime soon. So Sovereign Tech is one of them. The Lava Flow podcast is another, and I'll tell you more about what it is that I listen to in just a moment here on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio.
Bitcoin Not Bombs is a launching pad for nonprofits and social entrepreneurs into the financial freedom of the Bitcoin economy. Bitcoin Not Bombs offers premium publicity campaigns designed to facilitate an organization's adoption of Bitcoin as a payment system. Bitcoin Not Bombs is fully committed to being the hub of the nonprofit sector of the Bitcoin economy, maximizing the potential cross-promotion of all our clients and commercial partners. To learn more, visit bitcoinnotbombs.com. You can support FPP Radio by shopping online. Whether you're looking for precious metals, bitcoins, or books, you'll find that and more at shop.fppradio.com. Every purchase you make from one of my affiliates, like Namecheap, Spendabit, and Amazon at shop.fppradio.com helps fund FPP Radio. Or you can shop directly from FPP with Bitcoin in the Bitcoin store. That's shop.fppradio.com. The Doublespeak Dictionary by Leslie Starr O'Hara satirizes the marked difference between the ideal of we the people and the reality of we the elite, while offering an insightful glimpse into the clockworks of the totalitarian mind. Ever irreverent but never irrelevant, the Doublespeak Dictionary serves as a subversive and humorous but timely reminder that the emperor has no clothes. The Doublespeak Dictionary is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry. Online at FPPRadio.com.
Speaking of the Lava Flow podcast, one of the several podcasts that I do listen to somewhat not as frequently as I should. But speaking of, if you're fed up with the government running every aspect of your life, but you're not listening to the Lava Flow podcast yet, what's wrong with you? No, seriously. What's wrong with you? Go right now to thelavaflow.com/listen. It comes out every 2 weeks, which that's part of why I don't listen as often as I would like to, is because it only comes out every 2 weeks. So, like you can make the time, right? It's like a 30-minute commitment every 2 weeks. You can make that much of a commitment, right? So go to thelavaflow.com/listen. The Lava Flow podcast, channeling the flow of information to the libertarian, anarcho-capitalist, voluntarist, and agorist community. Subscribe today using any podcatcher at thelavaflow.com/listen, or you can just go back to sucking up to the government. The Lava Flow podcast, striking the root every episode. And I just downloaded, and I'm not being paid to say the following thing. I just downloaded the most recent episode of the Lava Flow podcast, and I will listen to that this afternoon while I am making milk bread. And what is milk bread, you might ask? Because I know that you're wondering, what is milk bread? Milk bread is this delicious yumminess that pigs absolutely love. So you take donuts and you take bread and you take basically any kind of wheat-based product, and you put it in a bucket, like a 5-gallon bucket. You rip the bread apart. That way it's not all, butt bread sort of stuff. Because a lot of the bread that we get, it's day-old stuff, and it's hot dog buns, hamburger buns, stuff like that. So you break it apart. That way it's not all the, crusty part. And you fill up the bucket. You smash the bucket down, fill the bucket back up, smash it down one more time, and then you put 1.5 gallons of milk or orange juice or apple cider or whatever the liquid is that you wind up getting that is also day old, and you let it sit for a few hours, and the pigs absolutely love it. So while I'm making milk bread this afternoon for the pigs that I am pig sitting, I will be listening to the most recent episode of the Lava Flow podcast, titled, I believe, New Year, New Laws. So I'll be listening to that. There's another podcast that I'll be listening to that I've downloaded where they interviewed Alanis Morissette, and she talked about, finding purpose with her life and something, and I forget exactly what all's in it, but it sounded interesting, so I'll listen. Other podcasts that I really like. There is, I realize this is not specifically a podcast per se, but there's Declare Your Independence with Ernest Hancock. I also like School Sucks, the podcast, not the statement school sucks, although, school kind of does suck, right? But the School Sucks podcast I really like. I like the Tom Woods Show, but I don't listen to every episode. I'll listen to episodes that I find to be interesting. And I think that's probably the reason that I don't have a podcatcher, is because I don't necessarily want to listen to every episode of something. Because if I tried listening to every episode of every show that I liked, even partly, I wouldn't have time to actually wind up doing actual work, because I'd just be sitting around listening to podcasts instead of doing stuff that's productive. But, so School Sucks Project, Tom Woods Show, the Lava Flow podcast, Sovereign Tech, and I've heard that Sex and Science Hour is going to be returning to the internets in podcast form. So that will be something to look forward to, because I really like Dr. Stephanie Murphy, the host of Sex and Science Hour, and also formerly did the Pork Therapy. That's pork, P-O-R-C, as in porcupine, not pork, P-O-R-K, as in like I need therapy because of the pigs. Although one of those little guys did push my hand into the electric fence yesterday, and that really hurt. But I digress and return to your questions. Next question came from Twitter. What are your positions on the refugees? And I could do probably an entire 30 minutes on my thoughts on the refugees, but I will try to boil it down because I've spent way too much time so far answering the previous question and just doing shameless self-promotion at the beginning of the show. So, position on the refugees. Now, I will begin by saying I think that the U.S. government should stop creating them. And I don't know of anyone that would disagree with that, although I'm sure someone would. Because there will be people say, well, no, we have to bomb because blah, 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 and come up with all these reasons for why killing people in the Middle East is a great, wonderful thing. But they ignore the fact that blowing stuff up in the Middle East or anywhere else in the country, for that matter, will create people that try to flee the bombing. And those people fleeing the bombing are, ding, 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 refugees. So, first thing with the refugees is stop creating them. Second thing with the refugees, if you are going to create them, then don't turn them away when they try to come escape your bombs. Because essentially what you're doing, and I saw this brilliant thing on Facebook, and I don't have it in front of me, but it went through and it said, like humans are not pieces of candy. Because you've heard people trying to say, well, if you had a bucket of M&Ms in front of you and you knew that one of the M&Ms was poison, would you let your child reach his hand in and eat some M&Ms? No, you wouldn't. Well, people aren't M&Ms. People aren't pieces of candy. And yes, just because you know that statistically 1 out of, fill in the blank number of people is going to do fill in the blank, that does not mean that you wind up turning away everybody. Because how many people that were born in the United States grow up to wind up killing people? And that's not a rhetorical question. And I don't have the number, but we know that people that are born here wind up killing people. It's just a fact. There are, thousands of people in jail right now for committing murder. There have been thousands of people that have been executed for murdering people. So if you're going to, apply this weird standard to people from one country, you should apply the same logic to people from your own country. And that brings me to another point that I'll get to momentarily. But some people are saying, well, we know that 1% or 10%, I've heard as high as like 15 or 20% of the refugees are quote unquote terrorists. Well, how many people that live in the United States that were born in the United States are classified by some agency somewhere as a potential terrorist? And again, if you're going to apply this, well, people from over there are potential terrorists, so a small percentage are, so none of them come in. Well, what about the people that are born here? Are you going to just start saying, kill every child when they're born because some of them may grow up to be bad people? And I don't think anybody would advocate for that, but because the people are from over there, it's okay to discriminate. And I don't agree with that at all. I'll rant a little bit more on this.
In 2115 New England, there are no borders, no states, and no regulations, yet never has a more peaceful and prosperous place existed. But Mr. Drake's security company has seen better days. Faced with the prospect of waning power, Mr. Drake intends to replace the anarchy of New England with a government. But at what cost? And can anyone stop him? Anarchy in New England by Joe Jarvis is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores. In 1999, Darryl W. Perry began a search for traditional values, which led him down a path to the ideas of liberty. He tells the story in A Rebel's Journey, My Path to Liberty. Of the book, Dr. Brian Sovereign says, sometimes it's funny, and sometimes I think it's crazy, but it's always authentic. Find A Rebel's Journey, My Path to Liberty by Darryl W. Perry on Facebook, read reviews on Amazon, ask for A Rebel's Journey wherever books are sold, or visit arebelsjourney.com. When her plush and comfy life suddenly and unexpectedly fell apart, Brooke and her dog Cloud set out to defy the odds. If this is a man's world, as they say, living on the streets is no place for a young woman. One day she awoke in the redwood forest and realized she had become a hobo, and would ultimately come to know exactly what it means to survive. How to Be a Hobo by Brooke Willett is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry.
So before I continue ranting about people and their views on refugees, and then actually give you my view on the refugees, I want to make sure that I tell you about something that is worth raving over. Not ranting, but raving. And that would be precious metals like gold and silver, and a wonderful company that will actually sell you some gold and silver, and they've been doing this for nearly 40 years. Roberts & Roberts Brokerage, since 1977, has been a trusted source for buying and selling precious metals like gold and silver, and they now take Bitcoin for precious metal purchases and have permanently removed the minimum purchase amount for all orders paid in the digital currency. Call Roberts & Roberts today for knowledgeable advice on buying and selling those precious metals and a forward-thinking approach to new technologies. 800-874-9760. That's 800-874-9760. Or visit them online at rrbi.co. That's rrbi.co. So, getting back to my view on the refugees. First and foremost, again, I think the U.S. government should stop having a foreign policy that creates refugees. Secondarily, I think that if refugees are going to be created by U.S. foreign policy or by any country's foreign policy, then as human beings, you have basically an obligation to try to take care of your fellow man as best as you can. Now, what do I mean by that? Obviously, I am not in a financial position to, room and board and house a refugee. But I also am not in a moral position, and no one else is either, in a moral position to prevent someone else from housing, boarding, and otherwise taking care of a refugee. Meaning that if you or your next door neighbor or some organization that you belong to wishes to open up your building and room, house, and otherwise care for refugees, no one should be allowed to stop you. Unfortunately, that's not really the way things are working. So there are all sorts of hoops and hurdles that refugees have to jump through. And then there's the part that I find most objectionable, is that the refugees are often funded through taxpayer dollars. There's some government program that winds up funding the room, board, and housing and care, etc., of these refugees. So I'm opposed to the welfare sort of aspect of this, but that does not mean that I'm opposed to people caring for the refugees, if that makes any sense at all. And I wish I had more time to really delve into this, but I've got more questions, so let me wind up continuing. There was a question that kind of a statement, not quite a question, but definitely question-like, that was left on one of the newscasts that I did a couple of days ago, where out in Arizona there was a teacher in a prison that wound up getting raped, and she sued the Department of Corrections, I believe, as well as the state government in Arizona, seeking damages because there was this situation that was created that allowed this to happen. So that there was gross negligence on the part of prison officials that allowed this teacher to be left alone with this guy that was in prison, previously convicted of rape. He wound up raping the teacher. So the question is, could you do a segment on how money is being substituted for personal responsibility? Because the thread was, the person that did this should be held responsible. And, the guy that raped the woman was serving, some number of years. His sentence was increased to life in prison. So he is being responsible, but at the same time, there needs to be some kind of restitution made to a victim, right? At least that's what most libertarians believe. Well, you can't unrape someone, but you can try to, make things better for them. And it's one of those things of, I can't tell you what will make it right, but I know what doesn't. Sort of like when the U.S. Supreme Court said, we don't know what obscenity is, but we know it when we see it. And there's been several court cases on fighting words, and it's basically, we can't define them per se, but we know it when we hear it. Same thing with restitution of, I can't tell you specifically what will make things better, but I know what won't. And not doing anything definitely does not make the situation better. And yes, I agree that giving this woman taxpayer money does not make the situation for society at large better because, society is now being, punished because one particular guy did something. But it does kind of send the message to the prison officials, because the prison was also fined. It sends the message of, you can't create these dangerous situations that allow your teachers or other staff to wind up being harmed physically. So, again, the question is about how money is being used to, or rather, money is being used as a substitute for personal responsibility. Sometimes the money is part of personal responsibility, if that makes any sense. So if you steal someone's television, obviously just giving them the television back does not really, quote-unquote, teach you a lesson. It teaches you not, maybe I shouldn't get caught, but it doesn't otherwise teach you stealing is wrong. So in addition to returning the television, there should be some kind of penalty to teach you, hey, this is wrong. And I don't think that being put inside a cage and having someone else pay to feed and clothe and house you for a period of time teaches you a lesson. It teaches other people a lesson. And that lesson is, we should be tougher on crime. Like, people should not be able to get away with this. That's why in some countries, they'll chop your hand off if you get caught stealing. But I think a better form would be restitution. You steal someone's television, you then compensate them an amount of money for the amount of time that they were without the television or their car or whatever it is that you wound up stealing. So restitution is beneficial, but I'm not saying this as a substitute for personal responsibility. I'm saying that the restitution teaches personal responsibility. Now getting into the final question, and I'll have to be quick on this. You see this phenomenon in the acceptance/denial of anthropomorphic climate change, where liberals or conservatives jump to one side or the other. Why does the condemnation of black protesters and looters in Missouri and Maryland and white militants in Oregon fall almost perfectly along ideological lines? And that's a very good question. And I see this a lot as just people having to be contrarian, to where they don't necessarily make up their mind until they hear what somebody else is saying, and then they either agree or disagree based on the viewpoints of the person that they first heard a position from. Does that make any sense? Hopefully it does. If not, send me an email, ama@fppradio.com. I'll answer next week.